Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're exploring the deeply human anatomy of grief, and we're doing it through the profoundly honest writings of C.S. Lewis. You know, we so often think of grief as just something to get over quickly, right? Or maybe a topic that's just way too heavy to look at closely. But today we're looking right at it. By breaking down the raw, completely unfiltered experiences of one of the world's most famous spiritual authors, we're going to uncover a structured way to understand our own sorrow. So if you want to grasp how a truly brilliant mind navigates the absolute darkest of emotional valleys, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
Have you ever felt completely paralyzed by the sheer fear of losing someone you deeply love? It's a heavy question, isn't it? But it's also a universal fear. It's this overwhelming dread that can strike literally any of us at any time. In this explainer, we're going to connect that exact paralyzing fear to a deeply personal journey documented in our source material. Because this isn't just about reading history, it's about looking into a mirror. It's about understanding our shared human condition when we're faced with the unthinkable.
Which brings us to Section 1, the sudden, deep sorrow.
Now, you probably know C.S. Lewis as a global spiritual giant. I mean, he's an intellectual titan who has guided millions through matters of faith and reason. But what the source text reveals here is actually a man completely stripped of all those grand titles. We see a vulnerable human being just broken by an unimaginable weight. We're going to see how even the strongest spiritual armor can be totally pierced when grief suddenly shows up at your door. First, he lost his father to cancer. Then, the loss of his mother, also to cancer. And finally, the crushing present-day reality for him, losing his beloved wife to cancer as well. This wasn't just a single tragic event. It was a compounding trauma, a succession of brutal losses that left even a master of spirituality completely defenseless against raw, unmitigated grief. It really goes to show that absolutely no amount of theological knowledge makes you immune to a broken heart.
Let's move into Section 2, paralysis of body and soul. We usually describe sadness as just an emotion, right? Something that happens purely in our minds or our hearts. But the text paints this intensely visceral, physical reality. For Lewis, it wasn't just profound sadness. It literally manifested as a total physical and mental paralysis. Think about that for a second. This world-renowned Oxford scholar was so overwhelmed by pain that the most automatic functions of the human body, like just swallowing saliva, actually felt impossible. The simplest daily routines completely lost their meaning. He had a total lack of desire even to shave. It really highlights how true deep grief doesn't just make you cry, it systematically shuts you down.
And you know, this paralysis went way beyond the physical. It bled right into his cognitive functions. Lewis described experiencing this incomprehensible fear and a really strange sort of amnesia. According to the text, he diagnosed his own amnesia as stemming directly from the terrifying prospect of forgetting his wife. He was absolutely terrified of losing the memories they shared. That dread was so incredibly powerful, it actually caused his mind to blank out. Have you ever been so afraid of losing a memory that your mind essentially short-circuits? That is the sheer level of intense psychological pressure he was living under.
This total paralysis is perfectly captured in his own jarring admission. He said, "I could pray for others, but hesitate for my wife." He admits that he could always pray for other people who had passed away with absolute faith, but when it came to his own wife, he hesitated. Why? Because as the source explains, the person you love is literally like a part of your own body. You just can't maintain the objective distance you need to pray without hesitation. He frankly confessed that he was basically just suppressing his sorrow with the sheer conviction that God wouldn't abandon him. This admission is wild, but it shows exactly how much this loss dismantled his usual spiritual practices.
That takes us to Section 3, a perfect love and loss. Okay, to truly understand the depth of his dark grief, we really have to look at the vibrant love that made the loss so completely devastating. You know the saying, the higher the peak, the deeper the valley? Well, it wasn't just one simple type of love they shared. It was devout, it was joyful, it was romantic, yet deeply practical. The source text uses these amazing contrasts to describe it. It was sometimes dramatic and intense as a storm, and then at other times as comfortable as a pair of soft slippers. Their love satisfied him completely, in mind and body. Seeing how rich and multifaceted this love was instantly raises the emotional stakes. When you lose a love that covers literally every spectrum of the human experience, the void left behind is absolute.
But here is a truly fascinating detail. Lewis actually married her already knowing she had cancer. He called this faith taken into account. He deliberately brought his faith into the equation of inevitable suffering. The text explains his reasoning here, and it's profound. If we truly, genuinely care about the sorrow of the world beforehand, and we factor it into our decisions, we won't be entirely overwhelmed when that sorrow eventually strikes us personally.
He literally walked into the storm with his eyes wide open, calculating the cost of love against the absolute reality of loss.
Now for Section 4. Not truncation, but a new phase.
This right here is the climax of this explainer. This is where Lewis's huge paradigm shift happens, and it transforms the very concept of death from a tragic end into something entirely different. So let's look at side A. This represents how we usually view the death of a loved one, as a sudden truncation, a violent severing. The text compares this to a dance that is abruptly stopped right in the middle of a song, or a flower that's suddenly cut off from its stem. But Lewis moves us to side B. He realizes that death is actually not the cutting off of a process, but merely one of many phases. It is a process continuing. It's a lot like the natural transition of summer turning into autumn. The dance hasn't been interrupted at all. The music has just changed tempo.
And the result of that realization is profound. Deepening grace allows us to fully embrace the deepening sorrow. The source points out that truly knowing and believing that death is just a phase actually deepens God's grace within us. And as that grace deepens, it gives us this immense, almost paradoxical capacity to actually hug our pain, to embrace our sorrow completely rather than just trying to flee from it. We finally stop fighting the season change, and we learn to just stand in the autumn wind.
Which leads us perfectly to our final section, Section 5, How to Misunderstand Grief Less.
So, what's the big takeaway? Why does all of this matter? How does a mid-century writer's personal tragedy act as a guiding light for anyone navigating profound loss today? Well, the source text makes a really vivid, modern comparison to explain this. It notes that Lewis's grief is displayed openly, laid out just like goods spread out on a bustling stall at Guangzhou Market. There's no hiding it, there's no sanitizing it. It is raw, it's visible, and it's accessible. And the text notes that when we are in the absolute depths of our own sorrow, when we find no peace in the world and our cries seem to bring zero comfort, encountering someone else's openly displayed grief is actually a profound blessing. It doesn't magically cure our pain, of course not, but it helps us, as the text beautifully says, to misunderstand grief a little less. Simply put, it makes us feel seen.
I want to leave you with a powerful thought. If death, and by extension any profound loss, is not a violently stopped dance but merely a changing season, how might you reframe a sorrow in your own life today? C.S. Lewis showed us that while grief can absolutely paralyze us, make us forgetful, and strip us of our daily routines, leaning into it with faith and understanding allows us to eventually embrace the changing seasons of life. Take this framework, look at your own struggles, and consider how you might view your own autumns. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this perspective brings you a little more clarity and maybe a little more peace.